Welcome to the Global Wellness HQ family of podcasts. We are your international headquarters for resources and ideas and insight in relation to the 9 elements of holistic wellness. Join us as we interview local and international wellness experts and learn how you can implement and improve one element or dimension of wellness at a time. Our experts will share their practical tips on wellness in one of these core areas: emotional, intellectual, occupational, physical, environmental, financial, spiritual, social, or habitual. We created our family of podcasts as a resource for anyone who is looking to integrate the 9 elements of holistic wellness into their daily lives. Welcome to the show. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. This episode, we are talking about building authentic relationships in business. And I have my new friend Gisele Marcus with me. So, Gisele, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about who you are and what you do? And then I'm going to talk to you about networking.
Certainly, a little bit about who I am. I currently work at Washington University in St. Louis. I'm a professor of practice, teaching a class called Foundations of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to our MBA students. It's a required course here, and it is a delight for me to teach it. It is my first opportunity to actually teach in the higher education space. I hail here from corporate America, and where the majority of my career has been spent in service operations. So I've been a general manager leading businesses at least 5 times. I've been a general manager 5 times, leading businesses as large as $800 million in size, even in an international scope, across about 26 countries. And the what brought me to networking is the fact that I learned about it, I feel, when I was older in age and thought, wow, when I say older, I'm going to say probably around 39, 40, when I actually did an expatriate assignment for my company in Johannesburg, South Africa. And in wanting to ensure that I had a job when I returned from the expat assignment, the networking component actually really started to turn on. And I figured out what I had been missing on for so long and wondered if I had these techniques when I was 20 years younger, who might I be today?
I love it. Well, let's have some fun. First and foremost, I believe that words matter. So, what would you say networking is? And then, equally important, what it is not?
Sure. So, what networking is really connecting in an authentic way, in a way that makes both people comfortable about connecting. It's about developing a two-way relationship. And it's about your being remembered, so you being memorable, um, and not being what I would call a one-hit wonder. So, what networking is not is going to, let's say, a reception of a dinner event and collecting as many business cards as you can. Um, that I would define as not being an effective strategy, because you're not connecting authentically. Um, in addition, I would say that networking is not anything that should make you feel uncomfortable in the space. Some people hear the word networking and they want to just run in the opposite direction of the camera, right? And if it makes you feel uncomfortable, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. When I say uncomfortable, I mean uncomfortable to the point that um, your palms sweat. It gives you a headache, that type of thing. That would be what it is not.
I love it. And I think the word I'm going to pull out of all of that, there's so many gems in it, is that authenticity. So that's one of my favorite words. And believe it or not, I was once asked at a presentation how one might fake authenticity. And I was literally speechless. So, what do you define as authentic?
So, what I define as authentic is you, and somebody might say, so I'm going to say this for me and for what I share with others is around you can be authentic, but having a systematic plan by which to do it. So, what I mean by that is understand what it is you're out to obtain, get better. I don't know. Let's just say, for example, you want to attain a promotion, and that may be at your current job or somewhere else. So, let's say that's the goal, and it's in the same space that you're in. Um, and if that's the case, well, then who would I need to network with? Who are the right people? That's the systematic piece, right? Um, how can I get to them? And the how is not, I walk up to them and say, hey, I want a promotion. That would be what not to do. Um, but figuring out how can I get to that person? Who may have access to that person to give me an introduction so that there's receptivity for my even dialoguing with this person. Then it's how often might I connect with this person? Like after I meet them, again, no one hit wonder. So you may say, okay, I want to connect with this person quarterly. I want to connect with this person every other month, for example. Then think about, and how am I going to do that? Right? Is that going to be by way of a text? Is that going to be by social media? Is that going to be in person? I have a coffee with you. And then when you're doing those things, what is it that you're going to share with them? And what is it that you're going to share is something not only about what you want, but something that you know about them. People love to hear about themselves. So, for example, when I had worked abroad and on my return, I wanted to hope to have a promotion. Um, the person who ended up being my sponsor said to me, come back every quarter, make sure that we have a dialogue, that we don't forget that you're out there. And I said, great. So now if I'm going to do that, what am I going to talk to him about? So what I learned about him was that he was a triathlete. I was on an expat assignment in Johannesburg, South Africa. Him and his wife love South Africa. So whenever I would come back, I would always bring him something that he could use as a triathlete. Whether that was a hat, whether that was, some kind of, a water bottle, something that he needed for his training. And then I would always do a deep dive to find out what's he up to. And I found out on social media, hey, he's actually going to do a triathlon in France, right? Oh, well, let me talk to him about that. So this is what I mean about being systematic, but also you're being authentic in that you actually are trying to find something out about the person. It's not just about you and what you want, but it's about knowing, and I'm going to say, and in the business term, this doesn't, people might get shocked with this word, but loving on that person. And what I mean by that is, what is it about them that they like? And how can you lean into that? And how can you make that better for them?
I love that, and I think that's what's missing in this world is everybody's thinking, "Oh, I've got my quota. I want to sell my thing," and they're trying to shortcut the relationships. And I think you and I can talk about a lot of things. I feel like systems around relationship building. I mean, you know, it is an old joke in my world and people are tired of it, but I tell people the day I proposed to my wife, I didn't have a plan B. I didn't have a backup ring, I didn't have a backup person. The proposal was very specifically tailored to her. And
Mhm.
when you say loving on your clients, you and I are on the same page because I think that's the secret of the best networkers I know. It's not, how do I pretend to care? It's how do I show that I do care? Is that a fair statement?
Very fair. I love the way you worded that.
And for the record, you and I, we met today through people that both, looked at us and said, you two need to meet. So that's the power of networking. Now, I feel like you and I are going to have a very special conversation about introverts today. So, first and foremost, um, how do you define an introvert and are you one?
So I define an introvert as someone who can get exhausted from what we call networking. Um, this is the person who also during COVID is the person who does not want to have back-to-back meetings, even if they are virtual, because they need space and time in between just to recharge themselves. It's the person who will say and will do when you say networking, they really want to. I'm not gonna say they want to run in the other direction, but they want to walk real fast in the other direction.
Very briskly towards, yeah.
Exactly. Um, and so that's who they are. That's how I would define them. And in terms of suggestions that I've made to introverts that seem to work. Oh, and I am not one. I'm an extrovert on steroids. That's just me. But because I'm someone who enjoys networking, I'm cognizant that I need to be clear about the audience I'm in. So if I'm in the audience of someone, and you might not know, like on just the initial, you're not going to know if they're an extrovert or an introvert, but you have to be mindful that they may be, right? So tips that I have given that seem to work at like at these cocktail parties, for example, set an amount of time that you want to be there. So a reception before like a dinner party could be an hour. Okay. So let's say maybe you decide to spend 20 minutes, 1/3 of that time in that room. So it's not that idea of, oh, it's a whole hour I have to be in here. 20 minutes. Can you do 20 minutes? It's just a third of the time.
Yeah.
And if you want to do it on the front end, it gives you some space to kind of have some room to breathe before the next event. So I'd recommend giving yourself a defined time and giving yourself a target. For example, in that 20 minutes, I want to at least meet 2, maybe 3 new people. That's it. At least 2 people. That's all, right?
Yeah.
So you figure that's an average of 1 person every 10 minutes, right? Sounds doable on the lower end.
Yeah.
And then the next is, well, how do you do that, right? So what I recommend for introverts is find the person that's like you in the room. And when I say that, find the other person that's by themselves, that's talking to no one. Why? Because they're probably waiting for someone to walk up to them and talk to them. And they're probably an introvert too. And they're going to be delighted if you just walk up to them and introduce yourself. Now, and that might give a little angst to an introvert, but let's say you do that part, then it's, well, what do I say? That's the next question, right? Because it's like you feel uncomfortable, and that's where the inauthenticity comes in. If you feel like you have to be someone that you're not. But let's just say, for this particular event, it's a nonprofit, excuse me, it's a nonprofit fundraiser. An easy question, what brought you here tonight? Why is it that you're interested in, let's say it has something to do with dance and art, in
Yeah.
dance as an art form. What is it about that? So that to me is an authentic question. And you don't know the person, so you can't say anything about them specifically, but you do know you're at a common place and they've made a decision to come here. So that's a question you can ask. Geography is also another great question. I happen to live in St. Louis, and St. Louisans have a thing about St. Louisans. So you can always ask, are you from these parts? That's easy. Yes, no, right? And if yes, wow, and I'm not from here, so I'm like, well, hey, I'm not from here. I'm from New York City. I know, Forest Park is bigger than Central Park, so that's something that St. Louis has on
Mhm.
New York City, for example. But as a New Yorker, what is it that I might be missing out on here in St. Louis? Because I've learned a lot of great jewels and things to do around here. You have to know people, so that could be a question. And if they're not from there, oh, they're from, I don't know, they're from Idaho. Oh, wow. Well, what brings you from Idaho to here? So questions they're easy, they shouldn't make you feel on edge, and they're not too personal. And then the person can kind of take it from there. So those are tips that I often give to introverts. And then I tell extroverts, be on the alert for the introvert. Because if you come up to them and you are on 100, they are going to want to run in the opposite direction. So therefore, watch your speed, watch their temperament.
Mhm.
See, and you may be able to tell if they're an introvert or an extrovert, but don't assume, because what you don't want to do while you're networking is you don't want to run people off.
Yeah, I love it, and I think that's, you know, great to have that awareness of the other person, because I think, one of the things, I am a diehard introvert, and the reality is when the world shut down with COVID, I went, ah, it was like, yay! I read a lot of books, I recharged, and then when the world said, okay, we're reopening, I was like, do we have to? Just 5 more minutes. But the aha moment for me is, and I share this as an introvert, we tend to ask a lot of questions. We tend to have deep conversations. We're happy standing in the corner talking to a couple of people. We don't want to meet other people. But when you do come up to us, as Giselle said, you want to dial your energy back a notch, because we're literally leaning away from you, and it's like we're about to do that cartoon moment where we zoom, and we're gone. You're talking to an empty spot. But the other thing I would say, and I want your thoughts on this, um, be really mindful and say, one of my favorite questions is there somebody here tonight you'd like to meet? If you're an extrovert, take your introvert friend and say, come on, let's go. Um, don't take them up to a large group of 20 people standing around talking. Take them up to somebody, one or two people, and say, hey, if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce you to Giselle. She's an introvert. Be don't say the word introvert, but just say Giselle's here. She's looking to meet so and so. Can you, just have that conversation? And the wonderful thing is, I was taught to network by extroverts, and I hated it. I literally, so I'm going to second the advice that Giselle gave. It was uncomfortable and awkward, and I literally couldn't get out of there fast enough. It was like I had all the energy to get myself there, and then 5 minutes later, the 10th person would come and shake my hand. And I'm like, nope, I'm out of there. So I did that as well. It was like, I'm going to meet three people today. And if I
Mhm.
meet three people, I've accomplished something. So my advice to you is learn how you are comfortable networking, and recognize that, sometimes, for the introverts, maybe the reward is you buy yourself a new book and you're going to go home and read it tonight. But take those easy steps. And as Giselle said, it's really be your authentic self. And, if introverts don't like small talk, they don't want to talk about the weather, but tell me where you're from and why you came here. Good God, we're going to talk for hours. Like,
Exactly. And you can use that pretty much in any venue. So you don't even have to change up your strategy, right? So I would say lean into that. And I love the fact that you're an introvert, so that you can validate that what I'm saying makes sense or not.
absolutely. I mean, the key is, and I think most good networkers do this. And one of my observations is the best networkers are very much aware of other people. And more importantly, I think they're very aware of themselves. So, I once said, somebody was trying to ask me to tell them who they were and how they should network. And I said, if you haven't done the work to figure out who you are, I don't have a hope in figuring it out.
Wow. That's powerful.
So let's talk about your journey, and this is the whole point of this podcast is I would like to see networking elevated to an art form. And I'm tired of the misconceptions that that multi-level marketing is networking. um, if you're in a room where everybody's trying to sell something to one another, that's not networking. Giselle, what are your thoughts? 'Cause I feel like you're bubbling over to say something.
I mean that, yeah, I think that's what helps give networking the I want to run in the other direction feeling. Because if you know someone's trying to sell you something and that's not something that you want, it's not comfortable. And it's not going to be a win for them either. So I would agree with you that I, I wouldn't refer to that as networking.
I don't know what it is, transacting, not networking. So
Hmm. I would say it's very transactional.
yeah. I love it. Now, let's talk about your journey because you said you came to networking later in life. What were your biggest inspirations, and how did you come to the point in your career now where you're very confident in your networking abilities?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, what happened is it's the way I grew up. So I grew up being told, when you go to work, head down, blinders on, do the work, focus on the work, do the work excellently.
Yeah.
No one said anything about being social, going to social events. So because your parents and your family tells you this, they're your nucleus, so you believe them, right? So you do that. And I'll never forget the first time I started a job after undergrad, and it was an after work event, and they had liquor. Oh my God, beer, wine. They kind of like wheeled in a bar. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I can't be seen anywhere near that. I can't touch a cup of anything because I don't want people to think that I drank. All of these
Yeah.
things, to later find out. And I just started looking and watching things. So I was looking at the people who seemed to be getting promotions. And I was like, wow, I might want one of those one day. And
Hmm.
I'm like, huh, that person get chosen over this person. This person seems to have their head down, blinders on, knows the work in circles. This other person, I'm like, gosh, they know the work, but they don't, I would say, breathe the work every second of the day, but they also stretch themselves. And I see them going out after work with Susie and with Joe, to have a happy hour. I see them going to the theater, with the boss. I see certain people getting invited to certain events of some of the executive leaders, others not. So I just started just by examining that, it just started to make me think about how getting to know people, there's nothing wrong with it. There's actually an advantage to it. And people do business with people they like. Often people promote people that they like. And if they don't know you, you've lost the opportunity to do that. So, where I learned this is when I went on this expatriate assignment to Johannesburg, South Africa. And the company that I worked for, like I know traditionally, like a GE, they would tell you like 2 jobs out. These are the 2 jobs that you're going to have after you have this expat assignment. Well, where I work, it was just like, hey, okay, well, you're going to expat assignment. Well, stop that job. And I'm like, okay, I stopped that job. I'm going to this other place. And how am I supposed to ensure I have a role when I get back? So my HR person said, she said, oh, talk to this gentleman named Ian, because he was the person who signed off on all of the expat assignments. And he actually was a direct report to the president of my business unit. So I said, okay, great. So I meet with him, and I say to him, and I'm gentle about it, right? Because I don't want to say it that crisply. So I say, well, not here, but at other companies, sometimes coming back from expat assignments, people have difficulty finding new opportunities. And
Yeah.
since you sign off on all of these, what would you recommend? So what he said to me was, I have an example of that. There's a gentleman who went on an expat assignment to Europe for 3 years, came back, and all like the executive team had changed, and he had pretty much been forgotten because he didn't reach back, talk to anyone. And then all of a sudden he said, then we're scrambling about, okay, who's back? Oh, does he work here? Oh, he does work here. I haven't seen him in a while. Well, let's try to figure out where we can put him. He said, and then for the executives, now we're in a tailspin, right? He
Yep.
said, so based on my seeing that, what I would suggest, so this is where I learned it. He said, this is what I would suggest: come back once a quarter to meet with your mentors and your sponsors. He said, of which I will be one. And I was thrilled because it's not often, like that whole sponsorship piece is to
Yep.
get someone to talk about you when you're not in the room is hard. So when he said that, I was thrilled, and I just held on to every word. I was like, whatever he says, I'm going to do it. So he said, come back every quarter, meet with your mentors, your sponsors. He said, and let us know 6 months before you come back that you're coming back. Why? He said, because sometimes we're drawing new positions. And while we're drawing those new positions, we can keep you in mind. So I was like, great. So I started doing that. And my my host boss when I was in South Africa was from Europe. So I wish I could do his accent because I love it. And he would say, why do you keep going back to the States? And I said, oh, I said, and he knew the the sponsor that I was referring to. I said, oh, I said, because I'm interested in a new role when I get back. And Ian told me this, and this. And he was like, oh, so what you're doing is kissing the rings. So I said, I guess in some terminology, it would be that. So he gave
Sure.
me the freedom and flexibility to do that. And it was eye opening for me. And then it forced me that every mentor, every sponsor I talked to, I would always do my homework before getting back, figure out what they're up to so that I could have something to talk to them about. And they would always be curious about my expat assignment, of course, right? But I
Yeah.
wanted to have something to talk to them about that would get them excited. So it forced me to study them, to learn them, to come up with creative ways to kind of bring up certain things like, oh, hey, I saw that your son, was playing football for XYZ school, and hey, that touchdown was amazing. They loved that. So
Mhm.
I did that, and in the end, what was the at the end of all of that work, I was so concerned about having an offer. I actually had 11 internal job offers when I finished my expat assignment in Johannesburg.
I love that, and there's so much you and I could unpack there because I think a lot of people, and I've been an expat myself, and it's like you go off to some remote outpost and you're cut off, and it's you learn all about the local culture and you have a lot of fun, and then it's like there's that big gap moment where you're like, okay, I'm done, I need to go home, I want to be near my family, whatever it is. And then you have that, oh my god, what have I done? How, there's that gap when you come back home, and people look at your resume and say, well, you haven't kept up with your local connections. So I love that idea. And I think from my perspective, it's that authenticity. You're helping these people, and something tells me you're one of those pay it forward people. you know you can't help. What I love about a good network is if you build it with intention, it will help you when you need it, but it's
Right.
also there to help others.
Absolutely. And you made a very good point about it's there when you need it. So here's the case, right? So if you haven't been doing the work when you need it, it's too late to start at that point.
Yeah.
So you have to be proactive about looking forward